Death waited at the bus stop. Miss Marple's story. Dear friends, welcome once again to Village of Mysteries. I'm Walter, and it is truly a pleasure to have your company this evening. A warm welcome to our listeners from around the world. We'd love to know where you're listening from today. Leave us a comment below and tell us, what is the most beautiful village or countryside you've ever visited? If you enjoy cozy mysteries, hidden secrets, unforgettable twists, and atmospheric village tales, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring many more original mysteries to life. Now, settle into your favorite chair, pour yourself a warm cup of tea, and prepare for an evening of secrets, suspicion, and surprises. And now, let the mystery unfold. Before we start, this is an original mystery, inspired by the timeless world of Miss Marple. Chapter 1. The Passenger Who Never Boarded. Mrs. Vale was dead before any of us spoke to her, Dr. Gideon Marsh said, and the 7 people gathered at Bellwether's bus stop turned toward him as though he had accused them all. The Creswick bus stood breathing at the curb, its engine coughing blue fumes into the fog. On the bench beneath the timetable, Honoria Vale sat perfectly upright in a black coat, her chin lowered behind a mourning veil. The conductor had touched her shoulder only after she failed to rise. Then her body had leaned sideways with the slow, dreadful obedience of a shop window figure. Miss Elspeth Wren did not look first at the dead woman's face. She looked at the left glove. It was buttoned at the wrist, yet a cream bus ticket lay inside it against the palm, while Honoria's fingers were loose and uncurled. How, Elspeth wondered, had anyone placed a ticket inside a fastened glove without disturbing the hand? "Stand back, please." Inspector Edmund Rook had not yet arrived, but Dr. Marsh's old professional voice returned, as if it had only been waiting behind a door. He bent over the body. The fog beaded on his silver hair. "No pulse. The skin is warm. She cannot have been dead more than 10 minutes. "That is impossible," said Lydia Vale. Honoria's niece was 28, pale from too many nights spent listening for her aunt's bell. A strand of brown hair had escaped her hat and clung to her cheek. She did not cry. She pressed both hands to her mouth, and Elspeth noticed a tiny crescent of flour beneath one thumbnail. Lydia had been baking before she came out. The kitchen at Vale House always smelled of warm bread before 8. That morning she had shaped one small loaf like a bird for the shepherd boy who found the injured robin, a private kindness Honoria pretended not to notice. "She answered me," Lydia whispered. "Aunt Honoria answered me." "So she did," said Miss Dora Pell, the village schoolmistress. Dora's neat grey coat had not collected a single drop of mist, though everyone else looked faintly silvered. "You asked whether she had taken her drops," she said. "Do not fuss, Lydia. We all heard her." Major Aubrey Flint struck his cane against the paving stones. "Perfectly clearly." His moustache trembled. 5 minutes ago at most, Silas Reed, the postmaster, nodded too quickly. Martha Crowe, Honoria's housekeeper, twisted the fringe of her shawl. A young woman in a green travelling coat stood at the far end of the shelter, watching them with dark, exhausted eyes. No one seemed to know her. Ben Tallow, the conductor, removed his cap. I called out Creswick. She didn't stir, thought she'd nodded off. The bus driver leaned from his window. "We'll be late." "No one leaves," said a new voice. Inspector Rook came through the fog with Constable Pym behind him. Rook was a broad man with a narrow patience. He took in the body, the witnesses, the idling bus and the altered timetable with one sweep of his pale eyes. "Turn off that engine," he told the driver, "and somebody fetch a blanket." Lydia moved at once, but Elspeth caught her sleeve. "Not from the bus, dear. Let the inspector see everything first." Rook looked at her. "Miss Wren." "Inspector." They had met over smaller village disasters, a missing silver cup, anonymous letters, a child who had hidden in a hayloft for 2 nights rather than admit breaking a window. Rook respected Elspeth in the reluctant manner of a man who disliked assistance but disliked being wrong still more. He crouched beside Honoria. Her veil smelled faintly of violets and something harsher underneath. Scorched wool, perhaps. One hand rested on a black umbrella propped between her knees. Its silk was wet enough to darken the paving beneath the ferrule. "It has not rained since Thursday," Elspeth said. Rook glanced up. "Fog is wet." Not that wet. Dora Pell gave a small, sensible cough. Mrs. Vale may have washed it. Honoria Vale, said Martha suddenly, never washed anything in her life. The housekeeper looked horrified by her own disloyalty. Lydia reached for her hand. Rook examined the ticket without removing it. Creswick single. She swore she would never go there again, Lydia said. At that, the young woman in green lifted her head. Rook noticed. Your name? Clara Venn. The name moved through the shelter like a draught. Major Flint's cane stopped tapping. Silas Reed stared at the ground. Martha made the sign of the cross before disguising it as an adjustment of her shawl. Rook's voice sharpened. Do you know the deceased? I was told to meet her. Clara's hand tightened around a small leather case. She wrote that she would take the 8:15 bus to Creswick. She said she had proof concerning my mother. What proof? Clara looked at Honoria's veiled face. Proof that my mother did not steal the Bellwether Relief Fund 20 years ago. The bus shelter became very quiet. From the bakery across the square came the hollow knock of a peel striking an oven floor. Somewhere behind the church, a dog barked twice and stopped. Major Flint said, This is neither the time nor the place for ancient slander. Ancient? Clara asked. My mother died with the village calling her a thief. Your mother died in the fire, Silas Reed muttered. No, she survived it. That was the first true shock of the morning, after the corpse. Clara opened her leather case and took out a folded letter, its edges worn white. She lived under another name. She died in March. This was among her things. Rook held out his hand, but before Clara could give it to him, Lydia swayed. Elspeth caught her. Lydia's skin was cold, and beneath the flower on her fingers there was a fresh red scratch. Sit down, Elspeth said. Not there. Lydia recoiled from the bench. Please. Elspeth led her to the bus step. Lydia swallowed hard. Aunt Honoria had been frightened all week. She locked the blue room. She burned papers. Last night she made me promise that if anything happened, I was to trust no one who agreed too readily. Rook turned toward the witnesses. 7 faces stared back through the fog. Who arrived first? He asked. I did, said Major Flint. No, said Lydia. Mrs. Crowe was here. Martha shook her head. Miss Pell was already waiting. Dora's brows lifted. I arrived with Mr. Reed. Silas Reed went the colour of old paper. You did not. For the first time their perfect agreement cracked. Then Constable Pym, who had been inspecting the timetable, called, Inspector, someone has changed the bus time in blue pencil. Rook stood. From what to what? From 8:25 to 8:15. Ben Tallow stared. But we arrived at 8:25 exactly. Elspeth looked at the church clock. It showed 27 minutes past 8. Lydia gripped her arm. Then why did Aunt Honoria write 8:15 in Clara's letter? Before Elspeth could answer, the dead woman's umbrella slipped from between her knees and struck the stones. The handle came loose. From inside the hollow shaft fell a tightly rolled strip of paper. On it, in Honoria Vale's unmistakable hand, were 6 words. Dora knows how the voice will travel. Chapter 2. 7 people in the fog. By 9 o'clock, the witnesses had been moved into the private room of the Bell and Crown, where the fire smoked, the kettle rattled on its trivet, and no one drank the tea Lydia poured. She poured it because she needed something to do. Even Inspector Rook, who distrusted unnecessary movement during questioning, allowed it. Lydia remembered who took milk, who disliked sugar, and that Major Flint's right hand shook more when his cup was full. When Clara Venn's teeth began to chatter, Lydia silently exchanged her own dry cardigan for the stranger's damp coat. Elspeth watched Clara accept the kindness with surprise. Honoria's niece had been treated all her life as though gentleness were a minor domestic talent. That morning it became courage. Rook placed the paper from the umbrella on the table. Dora knows how the voice will travel. Explain it, Miss Pell. Dora sat straight-backed beside the fire. She had taught 3 generations of Bellwether children to fear untidy margins. Mrs. Vale asked me about the speaking tubes beneath the old shelter. The waiting room was once a parcels office. A clerk could speak to drivers through a brass pipe in the wall. Could someone speak through it now? I shouldn't think so. You know how the voice will travel. I know how sound behaves. That is not a crime. Were you helping Mrs. Vale with something? Dora looked at the note, and for the first time her composure seemed worked rather than natural. She was fond of small dramas. She said she wished to frighten a coward into honesty. She did not name the coward. Major Flint laughed without humour. Honoria frightened people for exercise. Rook turned to him. You said you arrived first. I believed I had. Describe Mrs. Vale when you arrived. Black coat, veil, umbrella, sitting as she always sat, as if the bench had been placed for her convenience. Did she speak? When Lydia asked about her medicine, you did not address her yourself. Major Flint's eyes moved toward the fire. We had quarrelled. About the relief fund, Clara asked. Rook held up a hand, but the Major answered. About sentimentality. Honoria had developed a late appetite for confession. Dr. Marsh's cup clicked against its saucer. Some confessions come too late to be anything but vanity. Rook shifted to him. You were struck off the medical register in Creswick 19 years ago. Suspended, not struck off, and later reinstated. For falsifying a death certificate after the fire. Marsh's face tightened. I certified Miriam Venn dead because the constable brought me a body wearing her locket. The remains were burned beyond recognition. I was young, exhausted, and wrong. Clara's voice was quiet. My mother spent 20 years hiding because the village had already buried her. Marsh looked at her. Then I wronged her. The admission disarmed the room more effectively than denial. Rook questioned each person in turn. Silas Reed had come to post the Creswick mailbag. Martha Crowe had followed Lydia after discovering Honoria's bed untouched. Clara had arrived by the milk lorry. Major Flint claimed his morning walk. Dr. Marsh said he was going to visit a patient. Dora was travelling to a teachers' meeting. Their descriptions of the decisive 10 minutes were astonishingly alike. At 8:16, Lydia asked, Have you taken your drops? Honoria replied, Do not fuss, Lydia. At 8:18, Major Flint coughed. At 8:19, a bicycle bell sounded in Church Lane. At 8:21, Ben Tallow's bus horn was heard beyond the mill. Honoria then said, Not yet, though no one could agree whom she addressed. Elspeth listened until the sameness became louder than the words. Outside, cups clinked in the public bar, and a delivery horse stamped against the cold, ordinary sounds continuing, while 7 memories quietly rearranged themselves. Who first gave those times? She asked. Silas blinked. The inspector did. I did not, said Rook. Dora folded her hands. We reconstructed them together while waiting for you. Who suggested the bicycle bell came at 8:19? No one answered. Elspeth remembered Lydia's warning. Trust no one who agreed too readily. Rook sent Constable Pym to examine the old parcels office. The rear door opened into a narrow yard behind the abandoned ironmonger's shop. It had been padlocked for years, but the lock showed bright scratches. Inside, dust lay thick, except for one clean crescent beside the wall. A brass speaking tube ended behind the bus shelter's timetable board. Pym blew through it. From the private room across the square, they could not hear him, but when they returned to the stop, his voice emerged beneath the bench with startling clarity. Do not fuss, Lydia, he said through the pipe. Lydia flinched. Rook knelt. A person in the parcels office could have spoken for Mrs. Vale. Then who sat among us? Martha whispered. The dead woman, said Dr. Marsh. Or someone disguised as her, said Clara. Elspeth touched the bench. The wood where Honoria had sat was warmer than the fog should allow. Beneath it, hidden behind a loose board, Pym found 2 stone foot warmers wrapped in singed flannel. They still held a faint heat and smelled of lavender water. Dr. Marsh stared at them. That would explain the warmth of the body. I estimated death from temperature. How long might she have been dead? Rook asked. An hour? Perhaps 2. The impossible 10-minute murder widened into the whole morning. At Vale House, Honoria's bedroom had indeed been untouched. Her black walking shoes stood beneath the wardrobe, clean. The shoes on the corpse were old button boots, 1/2 a size too large. In the kitchen, the range was hot, and a copper kettle had boiled nearly dry. 2 cups stood on the table. One was Honoria's thin porcelain cup with the gold H. The other was plain white, wiped so carefully that no tea stain remained beneath the rim. Lydia stared at it. Aunt never allowed visitors in the kitchen. Someone she trusted, Elspeth said. On the sill, a wicker basket held a fledgling robin with one wing splintered between matchsticks. Lydia crumbled bread into its saucer. My aunt said it was foolish to save what cats would take tomorrow, she murmured. Then she brought me thread for the splint. Clara stood in the doorway. She wrote to me 3 times. The first 2 letters were cruel. She said my mother had run because she was guilty. The third asked forgiveness. Did you forgive her? I came to hear the truth. That afternoon the post-mortem began in Creswick. Before leaving, Rook examined Honoria's medicine bottle. The label prescribed digitalis drops for a weak heart. The level was lower than Lydia expected. Could too much kill her? Rook asked Marsh. Yes, but so could several garden poisons. Dora, who had come to collect a school key Lydia carried, paused by the kitchen table. It is could have killed, Doctor, not could kill, if we are speaking of a completed act. Marsh gave her an irritated look. Thank you, Miss Pell. Elspeth looked at the white cup. There was one place the wiping cloth had missed, inside the handle, a narrow, rust-coloured crescent, not tea, lip colour. Honoria never used it. At dusk, Ben Tallow returned from the depot holding the ticket ledger. His face was strained. I found the number, Inspector. The ticket in Mrs. Vale's glove wasn't sold this morning. When was it sold? Yesterday evening, on the last bus from Creswick. To whom? Ben swallowed. To Mrs. Vale herself, or a woman wearing her veil. Chapter 3. A Ticket to Nowhere. Ben Tallow was certain only in the manner of a man who had become frightened of certainty. She boarded at Creswick Market at 6:40, he told Inspector Rook. Black veil, black coat, same silver-headed umbrella. Asked for bellwether and paid with a half-crown. She never lifted the veil. Did she speak? 2 words. Single, please. Low voice. Could it have been Miss Pell? Ben looked at Dora, then away. Could have been anyone of the right height. Dora's lips thinned. An observation which clears everyone and insults me specifically. The ledger established that the ticket had been issued the previous evening. It did not explain why it had been placed inside a buttoned glove. Elspeth examined the glove at the police station beneath a green-shaded lamp. The wrist button was stiff with age, but the seam along the little finger had been opened and re-stitched in black cotton. Someone slid the ticket through the seam, she said. Rook frowned. Why go to the trouble? To make us believe Honoria had bought it herself without unbuttoning the glove, a theatrical impossibility made to look like carelessness, or to conceal the fact that the body was handled. The thread was ordinary. Martha used black cotton. Lydia used it for mourning hems. Dora's school sewing cupboard contained 12 reels. Even Clara carried a mending case. The blue pencil was no kinder. The altered timetable had been marked with a thick, indelible stroke. Silas Reed kept such pencils for registered post. Major Flint used one for racing results. Dora corrected map work in blue. Honoria had one on her escritoire. Bellwether, Rook said, is apparently built upon blue pencils and black thread. It is built upon people borrowing each other's things, Elspeth replied. That is more dangerous. At noon, they visited the old parcels office. The speaking tube had been polished recently inside the mouthpiece. On the floor lay a tiny brass screw and a curl of pale wood. Pym found a length of fishing line caught behind a nail, but Major Flint fished. Silas tied parcels with line, and Lydia used it to support runner beans. Elspeth put her ear to the tube while Rook spoke from the shelter. Do not fuss, Lydia. The words emerged flattened, robbed of age and sex. The pipe made Constable Pym sound like a tired woman. It could have made Dora sound like Honoria, or Honoria sound like someone else. Outside, Clara waited beside the ironmonger's yard. Inspector, I should tell you something. I followed Mrs. Vale last night. Rook's gaze hardened. From Creswick. I saw the veiled woman board Ben's bus. I had not yet spoken to Honoria, but I knew the umbrella from her letters. She drew it in the margin. An old family joke, she said. I hired a bicycle and followed by the lower road. Why not ride the bus? I wanted to see where she went before she knew I had arrived. And where did she go? The woman left the bus at Bellwether Cross and entered the school lane. Dora's school stood there, red brick and ivy. with a side door opening near the teacher's cottage. "Did you see her face?" Rook asked. "No." "Convenient." Clara's chin lifted, less convenient than lying. They searched the school after lessons. The building smelled of chalk, damp wool, and boiled cabbage. In the assembly room, scenery from the Christmas pageant leaned against the wall: cardboard battlements, a paper moon, and a dressmaker's dummy wearing a shepherd's robe. The dummy was Honoria's height. Its wooden neck carried a fresh nick shaped like a crescent, and one shoulder was dusted with violet powder. A child's paper crown had been pinned to its chest with the message, "Mind the wheels," written in Dora's disciplined hand. The wheels proved to be small brass casters concealed beneath the shepherd's robe, allowing one person to move the figure without lifting it. On the floor nearby lay 2 flattened tracks through the chalk dust, ending at the side door. Rook measured them against the laundry cart and found the width identical. Someone had practiced moving a seated burden from the assembly room into School Lane, not once but several times. Dora regarded it without surprise. "Mrs. Vale borrowed that yesterday. For what purpose?" "She said she required a seated figure." Rook stared. "You omitted that." "You asked about the voice, not the figure. Where is the dummy now?" "I assumed she returned it." It had not been returned. Nor was Honoria's silver-headed umbrella among her effects. The wet umbrella at the stop was a cheaper one, with a silver-painted handle. Along its inner ribs, Pym found flakes of flesh-coloured grease paint used in school theatricals. The deception took shape. Honoria had borrowed a dummy, a veil, and knowledge of the speaking tube. She had arranged a false departure. Yet the dummy had vanished, and her corpse had occupied its intended place. "Who knew her plan?" Rook asked Dora. "She told me only enough to ask for help." "Why help her?" Dora looked toward a row of copybooks. One page bore a child's painstaking sentence: "Truth is heavy, but a lie must be carried farther." "Because she promised to put right an old wrong," Dora said. That evening, Gerald Quince, Honoria's solicitor, arrived from Creswick in a mud-spattered motorcar. He carried a dispatch box and smelled of wet leather, though the sky remained dry. Honoria had signed a new will 3 days earlier. She left Vale House to Lydia, together with enough income to keep it. She left £5,000 to Miriam Venn, commonly believed deceased, or, should she truly be dead, to her lawful child. Clara sat very still. "To me, to restitution," Quince said. The wording was Mrs. Vale's. Major Flint, summoned with the others, struck his cane against the carpet. £5,000 for a dead thief's daughter. Quince opened the second compartment of the box. "There is more." Mrs. Vale left sealed statements to be read at tomorrow's parish meeting. She intended to identify those responsible for the disappearance of the relief fund. Silas Reed whispered. "Those?" "Plural." Rook held out his hand. "The statements." Quince's face changed. "They were here when I left my office." The compartment was empty. Only a faint dusting of blue pencil lay in the bottom, and beneath it, pressed into the velvet, was the damp outline of a key. Lydia made a small sound. The key to the blue room. They drove at once to Vale House. The blue room door stood open. Inside, every drawer had been emptied, and on the hearth, a fresh fire was consuming the last page of Honoria Vale's confession, Chapter 4, The Widow's Last Appointment. The confession burned stubbornly. Inspector Rook seized the coal tongs and dragged a blackening sheet from the grate. Elspeth smothered it beneath the brass fire screen, while Lydia fetched a baking tray. Between them, they saved 3 curled fragments, each fragile as moth wings. On one remained the words, "I permitted Miriam Venn to bear." On another, Flint knew the smaller sum had already. The third contained only, "My sister's child." Dora Pell stood in the doorway. The firelight sharpened the hollows beneath her cheekbones. "Whose child?" Clara asked. "No one touches these," Rook said. "Constable, close the house." The blue room smelled of cedar, ashes, and the violet water Honoria used on her handkerchiefs. The chimney drew in little sighs, lifting the scorched corners of the rescued pages, as though the room itself wished to finish speaking. A writing desk stood beneath the window. Its lock had not been forced. Lydia insisted only Honoria possessed the key, Yet the damp outline in Quince's dispatch box suggested someone had made a soap or wax impression. Martha Crowe sank into a chair. Mrs. Vale wore the key on a ribbon under her dress. Even in bed? Especially in bed. Lydia looked toward the fire. I saw the ribbon yesterday. She asked me to fasten it. Could you have taken an impression? Major Flint said. She turned on him with sudden colour. I could also have pushed her down the stairs every day for 10 years. I did neither. Elspeth almost smiled. Grief had stripped Lydia of obedience. In Honoria's diary, the previous morning bore a single notation, 6:30, final rehearsal, DP. No other appointment appeared before the 8:15 bus. Dora did not deny the initials. I came at 6:30, she said. Mrs. Vale showed me the dummy in her dressing room. We carried it through the kitchen and placed it in a laundry cart. She intended to take it to the stop before dawn today. What were you rehearsing? Rook asked. The false journey. I was to sit in the old parcels office and answer through the speaking tube. Mrs. Vale would watch from the ironmonger's upper window. Why? She expected someone to search her luggage once they believed she had boarded the Creswick bus. The luggage would contain false papers. She hoped to identify the person who had stolen from the relief fund. Major Flint gave a contemptuous grunt. A childish performance. You were frightened enough to call it slander this morning, Clara said. Dora continued. We tested the pipe. Mrs. Vale said, my voice travelled well. That explains the note in the umbrella. Afterward, I returned to my cottage. Leaving Honoria alive? Yes. Who took the dummy to the stop? She meant to do so herself at 7. The post-mortem report arrived by telephone. Honoria had died between 6:45 and 7:30 from a concentrated dose of foxglove, added not to her medicine, but to strong coffee. The liquid had burned a faint line inside her mouth. No coffee cup had been found except the gold H-cup in the kitchen. Lydia stared at Rook. I made her tea at 6. She never drank coffee. She did yesterday, Dora said. During rehearsal. You were there. So was she. The plain white cup with the rust-coloured lip mark became important. Clara wore no cosmetics. Lydia's lipstick was rose, Martha's none. Dora's a muted brown close to the stain. Dora calmly allowed Pym to compare it. It is a common shade, she said. It is also yours, Rook replied. Elspeth lifted the cup by its base, but the mark is inside the handle where lips do not go. Someone wiped the rim and missed this because it is not lipstick from drinking, it transferred from a thumb. Dora's right thumb bore no colour, her left did. I hold cups with my right hand, she said. Honoria held them with her left, Lydia murmured. Her right wrist ached. A person applying poison to the gold cup might have steadied it by the handle, yet the poisoned drink had been coffee, and Honoria's cup smelled only of tea. Dr. Marsh suggested the killer had poured coffee into another vessel, then washed it. The kettle had nearly boiled dry. Under its lid, Elspeth found brown residue and 3 soft foxglove seeds. Coffee brewed in the kettle, she said. Then the kettle reheated to destroy the smell. Martha began to cry. I picked foxgloves yesterday for the hall vase. Who knew enough to use them? Rook asked. Anyone who reads, Dr. Marsh said, or gardens, or teaches nature study, Major Flint added. Dora did not look at him, or has practiced medicine. By evening, every suspect possessed both knowledge and opportunity. Lydia had left the kitchen at 6:10 to deliver bread to the Robins finder, a shepherd boy. Martha had gone to chapel. Clara admitted reaching Bellwether before 7 and watching Vale House from the lane. Dr. Marsh had called at the back door with Honoria's prescription. Major Flint claimed to have been asleep. Silas had sorted mail alone. Dora had rehearsed the deception. Gerald Quince searched his memory for the lost documents. Mrs. Vale dictated one sentence twice. She said, Miriam Venn took £50, but others took 5,000 and her name besides. Clara went white. My mother did steal. £50, Quince said gently. The confession explained why. Clara left the room before he could say more. Lydia followed her into the hall. Through the half-open door, Elspeth heard Clara say, I crossed half England to discover she was innocent. She may have been guilty of one thing, and innocent of what ruined her, Lydia replied. Those are not the same. It was the kindest answer available because it did not pretend. In Honoria's desk, Rook found a bundle of blackmail letters tied with faded green ribbon. They demanded payments in exchange for silence about the girl who lit the flame. Each was signed with a crude drawing of a flint striking steel. Major Aubrey Flint's face hardened when shown them. A childish imitation of my name. The payments went to an account in Creswick, Rook said. Yours. Flint rose, knocking over his chair. Honoria owed me money. For what? For keeping her family respectable. He seized his coat and left before Rook could stop him. Constable Pym followed, but the fog had thickened again, turning the drive into a white corridor. 10 minutes later, Pym returned alone. Lost him at the churchyard. On the desk, beneath the blackmail letters, Elspeth found an envelope addressed to Major Flint. It had been opened and resealed. Inside was a note in Honoria's hand. Tonight, 9 o'clock. The reading room. Bring the original ledger, or Dora learns what you did to her mother. Across the bottom, in blue pencil, someone had written a second line. He will come early if he thinks you are dead. At that moment, the parish clock began to strike 8. From the direction of the reading room came the crash of breaking glass, and a man's cry cut sharply short. Chapter 5. The Umbrella Without Rain. The reading room was empty. One pane of the side window had been broken inward. A smear of blood marked the sill, and Major Flint's cane lay beneath it, with the silver knob bent. The door was unlocked. On the green baize table, beside an untouched chessboard, stood a whiskey glass, still trembling from the impact that had shaken the room. "Major?" Rook called. Only the clock answered, ticking with a dry wooden throat. Behind the curtain, they found a grey pigeon beating against the wall. Its wing had cut on the glass. The cry had come not from a man, but from Martha Crowe, who had followed by the church path and seen the cane. "The window was whole when I passed at 7, she said. "I thought he had been dragged through it. The blood belonged to the pigeon." Flint's disappearance remained unexplained. Rook examined the whiskey. Freshly poured. Elspeth touched the glass. "And the room is warm. Someone expected him." A coal fire had been lit, though the reading room steward swore the grate was cold at 6. In the ash lay a half-burned strip of black fabric. Lydia recognized the border of Honoria's mourning veil. "The veil on the body was complete," Rook said. "Then she owned 2, Dora replied. "No," Lydia said. "Aunt Honoria hated duplicates. She said they encouraged servants to lose things." Elspeth thought of the stage umbrella with its false silver handle. If the veil on the corpse was theatrical too, the real veil had been elsewhere. They returned to the bus shelter at first light. Overnight frost had silvered the stones, preserving shallow wheel marks in the mud behind the parcels office. The tracks were too narrow for a motor car and too broad for a bicycle. "A laundry cart," Dora said before anyone else spoke. Rook turned. "How do you know?" "We used one in the rehearsal." The cart was found behind Vale House, washed clean and turned upside down. A strand of black wool clung to one axle. Lydia's face crumpled when she saw it. "She carried Aunt Honoria through the village like washing." "Not she," Rook said. "We do not yet know who." "Someone did." Lydia walked away to the potting shed. Elspeth followed. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth, onions and paraffin. Lydia knelt beside an empty crate and began folding old sacking that did not need folding. "She was not easy," Lydia said, "but she was mine." Elspeth waited. "When my parents died, she took me in. She complained about my shoes, my laugh, the way I sliced pears. But once, when I was 12, I woke from a fever and found her sitting beside me. She pretended she had come to close the window. She had been there all night. That sounds like Honoria. I wanted her to say she loved me. Some people would rather stage an elaborate trap than say 3 simple words." Lydia gave a broken laugh. "Then she died in one." In the shed, Elspeth noticed the garden pump. Beneath it lay drops of violet-scented water. The wet umbrella had been washed there. In the drain trap, Pym recovered flesh-coloured grease paint and a tiny shred of grey wool, the same coarse cloth as Dora's school stage curtains. The umbrella's ferrule was scratched in 2 parallel lines. When Elspeth placed it against the laundry cart, the scratches matched iron hooks fixed to the side. "It was lashed open above the cart," she said. The veil and umbrella hid whatever was being carried. Honoria's body? Rook asked. First the dummy, during rehearsal, later the body. The wetness had not been accidental. The killer washed away paint, fingerprints and the smell of the shed, then failed to dry the silk. An ordinary attempt at cleanliness had become a clue. Along one rib remained a grain of laundry soap scented with lemon, the brand used at the school rather than Vale House. Dora said the caretaker bought it in bulk. Martha used plain soda crystals. Inside the cart's wooden frame, Pym found a folded scrap from a Creswick theatre programme. On the blank side was a list in Honoria's hand: dummy, black coat, veil, foot warmers, pipe tested, DP, in office, AF, watching luggage. AF, Rook said. Aubrey Flint. Honoria expected him to watch, Elspeth replied. She knew her blackmailer. Then why summon him to the reading room? To confront him with whatever he stole from the false luggage. The luggage had not been at the stop. But Clara remembered a brown case beside the bench when she arrived. Silas remembered none. Lydia said Major Flint had carried one away, claiming it was his. Again, their agreement dissolved when questioned separately. By afternoon, Rook found the brown case in Flint's tool shed. It contained blank paper, a brick for weight, and a small envelope dusted with green powder. Dr. Marsh identified the powder as harmless Paris green pigment used on wallpaper. It had stained Flint's fingertips and the cuff of his shirt, proving he opened the case. He took the bait, Clara said. What did he think he would find? The ledger, Dora answered. Rook looked at her sharply. You know a great deal about it. Mrs. Vale told me the ledger existed. Did she tell you where? Dora hesitated. No. Elspeth had seen that hesitation before, in schoolchildren who feared truth less than the consequences of its shape. Major Flint returned at 5, entering the Bell and Crown through the kitchen. His right palm was cut, and his coat smelled of river mud. He claimed he had fallen while avoiding Pym, then hidden because Rook had prejudged him. Where is the original ledger? Rook asked. Burned 20 years ago. Honoria believed you had it. Honoria believed everyone kept trophies of their sins. Did you kill her? Flint smiled, but his eyes shifted toward Dora. No. I merely taught someone else the price of being protected. Dora went white. Rook detained him for blackmail, but Quince protested that the evidence was not yet sufficient for murder. Flint agreed to remain at the inn under Pym's watch. Before leaving the room, he leaned close to Elspeth. You think the little schoolmistress is frightened of me, he murmured. She is frightened of the truth. Ask her what burned first, the curtains or Miriam Venn's dress. At 8:30, Pym reported Flint missing from his room. A service stair led to the lane. On the pillow lay a note, gone to finish what Honoria began. They searched the church, the school and Vale House. At 9:10, the reading room steward arrived with his key and found the door locked from within. No one answered. Rook broke the panel beside the latch and reached through. Major Flint sat at the chess table, his head bowed over a handwritten confession. The key was in the inside lock. Both windows were fastened. Honoria's real mourning veil had been tied around his wrist. Beside his dead hand stood the whiskey glass. And on the opposite side of the board, still warm, was a second glass bearing Dora Pell's lipstick. Chapter 6. The Voice Behind the Veil. Dr. Marsh pronounced Major Flint dead from aconite before the constable had finished forcing the door. The whiskey would hide the bitterness, he said. Death in minutes. Dora Pell stood in the corridor with her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles shone. I did not drink with him. Rook held up the second glass. Your lip colour. It is not mine merely because it resembles mine. Were you here tonight? No. Where were you? At the school, marking arithmetic books, alone. The room offered no easy escape. The windows were latched within, the chimney too narrow, and the only door had been locked with Flint's key from the inside. The key remained in place. A green curtain covered a book return hatch no wider than a dinner plate. On the table lay 3 objects: the confession, the 2 glasses, and a pawn carved from black wood. The chessboard showed a game interrupted after 7 moves. Flint had played white. His last move was impossible. His king stood in check, though he had written beneath the position, Your move, H. Honoria? Lydia whispered. Or whoever he believed had inherited her game, Elspeth said. Rook read the confession silently. His expression did not change, but Dora's did. He says he alone stole the 5,000? She asked. Rook looked up. I have not said what he wrote. You called it a confession. That is not the same. Dora's mouth tightened. The conclusion is obvious. Rook continued reading. The confession was written in Flint's heavy capitals, but 2 letters leaned with a schoolroom neatness foreign to him, the hooked F and the carefully looped Y. Elspeth had seen children create the same false clumsiness when disguising notes. Flint claimed he and George Vale, Honoria's late husband, removed the relief fund from the parish safe during the fire. They allowed Miriam Venn to be blamed because she had already taken £50. He admitted blackmailing the girl who caused the first flame, but did not name her. He ended. Neither Honoria nor I were innocent, but between she and myself, the greater guilt was mine. Dora gave a faint, involuntary shake of the head. What? Elspeth asked. Nothing. You corrected him in your mind. A schoolmistress's affliction. Neither was. And between her and me, Major Flint knew better. Rook folded the page. You knew the errors before I read them aloud. For 1 second the room seemed to contract. Then Dora said, I saw the last line over your shoulder. Rook glanced at where she had stood. The paper had faced him, and the light was poor. But accusations, unlike proof, could not be locked into place by a stare. The second glass was tested. It contained only water and a smear of lipstick deliberately applied around the rim. The first held poisoned whiskey. Flint had drunk alone. The killer needed only to ensure he entered, locked the door himself, and poured from his own flask. His flask was found in his coat pocket. Aconite coated the cork, but not the whiskey remaining below it. When Flint tipped the flask, the first measure had washed poison from the stopper into his glass. The rest was safe. Prepared earlier, Dr. Marsh said. He carried his murderer with him. The locked room was therefore not an escape puzzle. It was a timetable puzzle. Who had access to the flask before Flint locked himself in? Pym remembered confiscating it at the inn, then placing it in a desk drawer. The drawer key hung in the public passage because the landlord trusted everyone in Bellwether. Between 7 and 8, Lydia crossed the passage with Clara. Silas delivered a telegram. Martha fetched hot water. Dora came to ask whether Flint had returned. Dr. Marsh used the telephone, and Major Flint himself went in twice. The entire village had passed the poison. The note on Flint's pillow was written in blue pencil on school exercise paper. Dora identified it as standard county stock. So you admit it came from your school? Rook asked. It came from every school in the county. Who knew he would go to the reading room? Anyone who saw Honoria's letter. The mourning veil tied to his wrist carried a scent of violet water and smoke. Under magnification, Pym found a strand of fair hair knotted in the mesh. Lydia was brown-haired. Dora's hair was iron grey. Martha's was white. Clara's was dark. Honoria had been fair before age faded it, but the strand was fresh and golden. Clara touched her own black hair. My mother was fair. She opened the worn letter she had brought from Creswick. Until then she had refused to surrender it, because it was the last private thing her mother had left. Now she read aloud. Miriam Venn had taken £50 from the fund to help a young woman whose mother required an operation. The young woman had begged Honoria for assistance and been refused. Miriam planned to replace the money after the bazaar. Before she could, Major Flint discovered the shortage. He threatened exposure. During their struggle in the parish room, a lamp fell against the curtains. The letter stopped there. A corner had been torn away. Who was the young woman? Lydia asked. Clara's eyes went to Dora. Dora rose. Your mother lied. You have not heard the name. I know what she implied. Then it was you. Dora's chair scraped the floor. My mother was dying. Honoria could have saved her with the cost of one dinner. Miriam gave me money. I did not know it came from the fund. Did you knock over the lamp? Rook asked. No. Flint said the girl caused the first flame. Flint said whatever purchased obedience. The controlled schoolmistress had vanished. In her place stood a woman who had carried shame for 20 years and found it heavier each year. My mother, Beatrice Pell, was Honoria's half-sister, Dora said. Their father acknowledged Honoria and left Beatrice nothing. Honoria knew. She called us unfortunate acquaintances. Miriam tried to help. Then the fire came, my mother ran inside for me, and she died. Lydia whispered, Aunt Honoria was your sister, half-sister. She preferred fractions when speaking of blood. The emotional arithmetic of the case changed. Honoria's phrase, my sister's child, referred not to Clara, but to Dora. The will's restitution could expose Dora's old secret. Major Flint's blackmail had kept her tied to him. Both victims had power over her. Rook arrested Dora on suspicion of the two murders. She did not resist. At the door she looked at Elspeth. Ask Clara why her mother tore the letter. Ask who visited Creswick in March. Ask whose lipstick was in Honoria's kitchen before you decide I am the only woman who can lie. After she was taken away, Clara sat beside Lydia in the blue room. From the church came the muffled practice of the choir, each note softened by stone. I did visit my mother in March, Lydia said suddenly. Clara turned. Lydia's eyes filled. Aunt Honoria sent me. She told me to make Miriam sign something before she died. What? A statement saying you were not her daughter. Clara stared at her. Lydia reached into her dress and drew out a sealed envelope she had hidden against her heart. Across it Miriam Venn had written, To Clara, when Honoria Vale is dead. The seal had already been broken. Chapter 7. The Woman from Creswick. Lydia had opened Miriam Venn's envelope in the railway carriage from Creswick and spent 5 months pretending she had not. I was afraid of what it contained, she said. Then I was more afraid of Aunt Honoria. Clara broke the seal fully. The letter inside was only 2 pages, written in a hand weakened by illness. My dearest Clara, it began, you are my daughter in every way that deserves the name, but I did not give birth to you. Clara stopped reading. Lydia reached for her, but Clara moved away. The letter explained that on the night of the parish fire, Miriam had found 19-year-old Dora Pell in the churchyard, with a newborn child wrapped beneath her coat. Rain had soaked the blanket, and sparks drifted across the graves like red insects. Miriam tucked the infant beneath her own dress for warmth, while Dora tried to return for Beatrice. A constable held Dora back. The burn scar Clara remembered on Miriam's wrist had not come from a kitchen accident, but from shielding the child from falling ash. The baby's father was George Vale, Honoria's husband. Dora's mother, Beatrice, had gone into the burning parish room seeking papers that proved George's promise to support Dora and the child. She never came out. Miriam took the infant and fled Bellwether after the fire. Later, she registered the child as Clara Venn and raised her as her own. Major Flint knew. Honoria discovered the truth years afterward, but kept silent to preserve the Vale name. Clara finished the letter without expression. My mother was Dora Pell. Lydia said. She is alive. In a cell. The words struck harder than anger. Rook reread the letter. Why did Honoria ask Miriam to deny Clara was her daughter? Lydia answered. Aunt wanted a signed statement that Clara was adopted, so Mr. Quince could draw the will correctly. I thought she meant to disinherit her. I was wrong. Gerald Quince confirmed that Honoria had obtained proof of Miriam's legal adoption. Clara remained the beneficiary. Honoria's secrecy, cruel for years, had recently turned toward restitution. Why now? Elspeth asked. Because Miriam sent her the original relief fund ledger in March, Quince said. Mrs. Vale said it proved everything. The ledger had arrived not at Vale House but at a bank in Creswick. Honoria feared Flint watched her post. She left instructions for it to be released to a veiled woman carrying a silver-headed umbrella and the phrase, "Winter accounts." Dora knew the phrase. During questioning, she admitted collecting the ledger from Creswick on the last bus. Honoria asked me to, she said from behind the interview room table. She trusted me because the truth concerned us both. Then where is it? Rook asked. I gave it to her during rehearsal. It was not in the blue room. Then ask Lydia. Lydia had not seen it. Martha had not. Major Flint's tool shed contained only the false luggage. Silas denied handling it. The ledger seemed to have vanished between Dora's arrival at 6:30 and Honoria's death. Elspeth asked to examine the silver-headed umbrella Dora had carried from Creswick. It was not at Vale House, the school, or the police station. Ben Tallow remembered the veiled passenger taking it off the bus. Clara had followed her to School Lane. There the trail ended. In Dora's cottage, Elspeth noticed an umbrella stand painted with yellow primroses. Its base was unusually deep. Pym removed the felt lining and found a narrow compartment, but it was empty except for violet dust and a strip of red leather. The ledger was bound in red leather, Quint said. Dora closed her eyes. You hid it here, Rook said. I placed it there for 1 hour. Honoria insisted no one must see me carry it into Vale House. At 6:15 yesterday morning, she collected it herself. Your diary says rehearsal at 6:30. She arrived early. Did anyone see her? No. Convenient again. Clara stood outside the cottage, unwilling to enter. Lydia brought her tea in a jam jar, because all the cups belonged to Dora. Clara held it between both hands but did not drink. Did you know? She asked Lydia. About George Vale? No. Honoria did. Every time she wrote that my mother was a thief, she knew I was her husband's child. She was ashamed. Of me. Of herself, I think. Clara looked toward the school window where children's paper stars hung crookedly. Dora taught me to read when I was 5. Miriam sent me to Bellwether for one summer and told me Dora was an old friend. I remember her mending my dress. She cried when she thought I was asleep. The revelation did not create affection. It uncovered its buried source. Elspeth returned to the parcels office. The clean crescent in the dust had the shape of Dora's deep umbrella stand, not a person's foot. Someone had carried the stand there to hide the ledger temporarily during the bus stop deception. In the speaking tube, Pym found a rolled fragment of red leather wedged beyond reach. The tube had served 2 purposes, to carry a voice and to conceal a document. They dismantled the pipe. The missing ledger slid out, its brass clasp scraping along the metal with the sound of a knife being sharpened. The first pages recorded subscriptions to the Widow's Winter Fund. £50 had been removed in Miriam Venn's hand and marked loan for BP. The later pages showed 5,000 transferred under signatures belonging to Major Flint and George Vale. In the margin, Honoria had written years afterward, I knew and kept silent. The final page described the fire in Miriam's hurried script. Flint confronted Dora. He seized the lamp when she tried to leave. The lamp struck the curtain. Dora was not responsible for the first flame. Dora's blackmailer had built 20 years of terror upon a lie. Then Honoria's confession would have freed her, Lydia said. Why kill to stop it? Elspeth turned the last page. A narrow strip had been cut from the bottom. The surviving sentence ended. If I die before telling Clara, the person who most fears her knowing is... The name was gone. Rook examined the cut. Recent. A faint brown thumbprint marked the margin. Dr. Marsh tested it and found grease paint mixed with foxglove pollen. The person who handled the stage umbrella handled the poison, Rook said. Clara looked toward the police station where Dora waited, but Elspeth was looking at the ledger's spine. Caught beneath the red leather was a single short golden hair, the same colour as the strand knotted in Honoria's mourning veil beside Major Flint's body. Clara's hair was black now. In the childhood photograph enclosed with Miriam's letter, it was bright gold. Chapter 8. The 10-Minute Murder. Clara did not deny the golden hair. My hair is fair, she said. I have coloured it since I was 16. She removed her hat. Along the parting, beneath the black dye, ran a narrow line of gold. Rook placed Miriam's letter beside the ledger. You lied about arriving on the milk lorry. Yes. You were at Vale House before 7. Yes. Lydia stared at her. You met Aunt Honoria. Clara's composure broke at last. She sent a second message telling me to come before the bus. I entered through the kitchen at 6:20. She gave me coffee and showed me the ledger. Then she told me Dora was my mother and George Vale my father, as if she were announcing the ownership of a field. The plain white cup had been Clara's. The brown lipstick inside its handle came from her thumb after she wiped the rim. She had denied cosmetics because she did not want anyone to know she had been there. "Did you put foxglove in Honoria's coffee?" Rook asked. "No. She drank tea while I drank coffee. The kettle was clean then." "Why is your hair in the mourning veil? She made me try it on." Clara's face twisted. She said the bus stop trick required someone of the family height if Dora lost her nerve. I tore it off. It caught in my hair. And the grease paint. She showed me the umbrella and dummy in the dressing room. She was proud of the deception. Clara had left at 6:40, carrying neither ledger nor veil. From the lane, she saw Dora enter the kitchen. She concealed this because she feared giving police the final piece against her mother. "The first kindness you offered Dora," Elspeth said, "was a lie." Clara looked toward the station cells. It was the only one she had left me room to give. Rook did not charge Clara, but suspicion no longer rested neatly upon one person. Her secret visit explained the hair, lipstick and paint. It also narrowed the poisoning to the minutes after she left. At Elspeth's request, the 7 witnesses returned to the bus stop and stood where they remembered standing. Fog had lifted, exposing how small the shelter truly was. The church clock struck 10. The bakery vent released a warm smell of yeast and scorched flour. "Do not discuss your answers," Elspeth told them. "Point to where Miss Pell stood when Honoria said, 'Do not fuss, Lydia.'" Major Flint was dead, and Dora under arrest, leaving 5 witnesses and Clara. Lydia pointed beside the timetable. Martha pointed near the curb. Silas indicated the far post. Dr. Marsh said Dora stood behind him. Clara said she had not seen Dora at all. "Yet, yesterday you all agreed she arrived with Mr. Reed," Rook said. "I agreed because Miss Pell said so," Martha admitted. Silas rubbed his jaw. "She came from Church Lane just before the bus. I remember now. She asked what Mrs. Vale had said." Lydia closed her eyes, then repeated it as if she had heard. The 10-minute murder had depended not only on fog but on the human wish for a tidy account. While waiting for Rook, Dora had named the times, placed herself among them, and repeated each sound, the bicycle bell, the horn, Lydia's question, until recollection hardened around her version. She had stood nearest the church clock, announcing each minute as though accuracy were a kindness. No one had checked a watch. They had borrowed time from the one person who needed to alter it. Elspeth entered the parcels office and spoke through the tube. Outside, Lydia answered as she had that morning. "Have you taken your drops?" "Do not fuss, Lydia," Elspeth replied. The pipe stripped her voice into Honoria's dry register. She waited, then said, "Not yet." No movement from the figure was necessary. The opened umbrella concealed the face. The mourning veil concealed the mouth. The foot warmers preserved body heat. The altered timetable brought the witnesses 10 minutes early and made them wait beside what they believed was a living woman. At 8:22, Dora left the parcels office through the rear yard, crossed Church Lane, and joined the group. The bus arrived 3 minutes later. In the confusion, she claimed to have been present throughout. "How did she know what Lydia would ask?" Rook said. "Because Lydia asked it every morning," Elspeth replied. "A rehearsed life provides its own dialogue." The ticket inside the glove created the impression that Honoria intended to travel. The opened seam allowed Dora to insert it after death without working the stiff wrist button. The wet umbrella, washed of stage paint, explained why no one recognized it as a school prop. The laundry cart transported the corpse before the square became busy. Every part of the trick had first belonged to Honoria's plan. She meant the dummy to sit on the bench while Dora supplied the voice. Major Flint would steal the false luggage and expose himself. Honoria would confront him later with the ledger. "But the dummy disappeared," Lydia said. "They found it at last in the ironmonger's upper room, folded awkwardly into a cupboard. Honoria had placed it there during rehearsal. Dora had left it and substituted the body. Rook's case seemed complete. Dora had means, opportunity, and knowledge. Yet Elspeth remained troubled by one detail. "The kettle," she said. "Why poison Honoria with coffee when Honoria did not drink coffee?" Dr. Marsh considered. A concentrated brew of foxglove could resemble coffee. Then it was not a beverage, it was a disguise. In Vale House, they repeated the kitchen sequence. The gold H cup smelled of tea. The plain cup belonged to Clara. The kettle held foxglove residue because the poison had been brewed there. But no third cup existed. Elspeth opened the cupboard. Honoria's medicine bottle stood behind the sugar. Its glass dropper had a brown stain inside the rubber bulb. The poison was brewed in the kettle, she said, then drawn into the medicine dropper. Honoria took it herself when Lydia was not there. Lydia's face went blank. Aunt believed they were her heart drops. Someone replaced them. The bottle label had been loosened and pasted over another. Steam from the kettle lifted one corner. Beneath Honoria's name appeared part of an older school label, Nature Table, D. Pell. Rook exhaled. Dora brought the bottle. Perhaps, Elspeth said, but we have not yet explained why Honoria wrote the note about the voice, why the original umbrella vanished, or why Flint entered the reading room expecting to play chess with a dead woman. At that moment, Constable Pym arrived from the station, breathless. Miss Pell's cell is empty. The matron found a school key in the lock and the window open. On the cell table, Dora had left one sentence in blue pencil. Clara deserves to hear it from me before Miss Wren makes a lesson of it. Chapter 9. What the fog concealed. Elspeth knew Dora would go to the school, because people in flight rarely choose a strange refuge. They choose the room in which they have spent years believing themselves safe. The assembly hall was dark except for the red eye of the stove. Paper stars stirred in the draught. Clara sat on the edge of the platform, and Dora stood beside the dressmaker's dummy, one hand resting on its blank shoulder. "I have told her," Dora said. Clara's face was wet but calm. "She told me George Vale was my father. She told me Miriam saved us both." Rook entered behind Elspeth, followed by Pym. "Step away from the stove, Miss Pell. There is nothing in it but coal." Dora almost smiled. "You expected a final document in the flames. Honoria taught us all to expect theatre." Elspeth looked around the hall. On a shelf stood blue pencils, black thread, grease paint and exercise paper. None proved murder. Proof lay not in the presence of such things, but in the order in which they had been used. "You collected the ledger in Creswick," Elspeth said. "You rehearsed Honoria's false departure. You knew the speaking tube, the dummy, the foot warmers and the altered timetable. You knew Major Flint would steal the brown case. I have admitted all that. Honoria intended to place the dummy at the stop. She would watch from the ironmonger's room while you supplied her voice. After Flint took the case, she would meet him at the reading room and force him to produce the ledger he claimed to possess. He possessed only fear. Before the performance, Clara came to Vale House. She drank coffee and learned the truth. When she left, you entered. Honoria had already brewed tea. You used the kettle to make a concentrated foxglove infusion, poured it into the old nature study bottle, and pasted Honoria's medicine label over yours. Dora's gaze went to the stove. "She took the drops herself," Elspeth continued. "That was important. No cup needed to be forced upon her. While she weakened, you argued. She refused to postpone the parish statement. She meant to name George Vale, Flint, Miriam, and you. She meant to display Clara before the village like an exhibit." Clara looked at her. "You could have told me." "I tried, once. You were 5. You asked whether I was the sad lady from the school. I could not make you sad too." Elspeth's voice softened, but not the words. "Honoria died in the dressing room shortly before 7. You placed her in the laundry cart under the stage umbrella and veil. At the shelter you substituted her body for the dummy, tucked warm stones beneath her coat, inserted yesterday's ticket through the opened glove seam, and hid in the parcels office." Dora said nothing. The altered timetable gathered witnesses early. Lydia asked her customary question. You answered through the pipe. Later you said not yet, then left by the rear door, and joined the group before the bus came. While everyone waited for Inspector Rook, you supplied the times and repeated their own observations until they remembered you as present. Martha's wet umbrella, the scorched flannel, the bicycle bell. Small things had become the scaffolding of a lie. "What happened to Honoria's silver umbrella?" Rook asked. Dora pointed to the dummy. Pym unscrewed its wooden base. Inside lay the umbrella, collapsed around the missing strip from Miriam's letter and the cut end of the ledger page. Dora had hidden every dangerous scrap inside the very object meant to represent Honoria. The missing sentence read, "The person who most fears her knowing is Dora. Because love has made her as secretive as Honoria. Clara read it twice. Miriam was not accusing you of the fire. No, Dora said. She was accusing me of cowardice. And she was right, Clara replied. Rook turned to the second murder. Flint recognized the trick. He saw me come from Church Lane. He knew the voice had come through the pipe. At Vale House, he whispered that silence had become more expensive. You poisoned his flask at the inn. Dora's eyes flickered. The landlord's drawer was unlocked. You coated the inner cork with aconite from the school poison cabinet. Flint carried it to the reading room and locked himself in. The first whiskey washed the poison into his glass. The second glass, Pym asked. Prepared beforehand, Elspeth said. Water, lipstick, warmed beside the fire to suggest company. The confession and chessboard were also waiting. The room did not need a secret exit, because the murderer had left before the victim arrived. Dora had broken the side window to create noise and confusion, then joined the search. The pigeon's blood encouraged the idea of violence at the room. Later, her blue pencil note sent Flint from the inn. Honoria's veil, taken from the brown case he stole, served as proof that the summons concerned the old crime. And the confession? Rook asked. Dora wrote it. She knew its exact grammatical errors before you read them aloud. She could not help correcting her own disguise. Elspeth placed the page beside one of Dora's marked exercise books. In the margins, the same blue pencil formed identical commas, narrow hooks turned inward like tiny question marks. The forged capitals were deliberately rough, but the punctuation remained disciplined. Even the blot beneath the word innocent had been sanded with the violet-dusted powder kept beside Dora's classroom ink. None of these details alone could condemn her. Together they showed the patient habits of a hand, attempting to become another hand, and failing in the smallest courtesies of writing. Rook had once said criminals were caught by what they forgot. Elspeth thought they were more often caught by what they could not stop being. That was the handwriting's final betrayal. Dora looked almost amused. A ridiculous mistake. A human one. The case had become logical, yet Elspeth sensed something still resisted. Dora had burned Honoria's confession, hidden Miriam's letter strip, and killed the blackmailer. But she had left the ledger in the speaking tube, where dismantling would inevitably reveal it. She had hidden the original umbrella in the dummy, rather than destroy it. She had staged clues with excessive care and concealed others badly. You wanted the theft exposed, Elspeth said. You wanted Miriam cleared and Flint condemned. You killed the only two people who could control how the truth was told. Dora's face changed. That is why this was not merely concealment. It was authorship. You meant to decide which truth survived. Clara rose. And what place did I have in the story you wrote? Dora reached toward her but stopped before touching her sleeve. The place where you never had to know George Vale was your father. I would rather have an ugly truth than a beautiful lie. Dora closed her eyes. Rook stepped forward with the handcuffs. Before he reached her, the school clock gave a metallic click. Instead of striking 11, it began to play a thin recorded voice from the elocution cylinder used in lessons. Honoria Vale's voice filled the hall. You have forgotten, it said, that there will be 8 witnesses. Dora opened her eyes in terror. The cylinder continued, and the 8th will know which one of us is lying. Chapter 10. The 8th Witness. The school clock was not an ordinary clock. Dora used its spring motor to play wax cylinders during elocution lessons, so that children could hear their own swallowed consonants and wandering vowels. Honoria had borrowed it for the rehearsal. She had left one cylinder inside and set the mechanism to release when the clock struck 11. Her recorded voice was thin but unmistakable. There will be 7 people at the stop, Honoria said. Lydia, Flint, Marsh, Reed, Martha, the Venn girl, and Dora. Dora's voice answered from farther away. I cannot be in the parcels office and among them. You will join them at the end. People remember a group as they last saw it. And the 8th witness? A click sounded, followed by Honoria's dry laugh. The 8th is this cylinder. I have lived too long among liars to trust a performance without a record. The hall remained still. Dora seemed not terrified now, but tired. A coal settled inside the stove with a soft collapse. Clara stared at the brass horn as though Honoria had entered without opening a door. the machine lending the dead woman a thin mechanical breath. Lydia heard the old authority in every clipped syllable, but also something newly fragile. Honoria had trusted machinery more than mercy, yet even her trap depended upon someone choosing to listen. The recording continued. Honoria explained that after Major Flint stole the false case, she would confront him with the ledger. At the parish meeting, she would confess George Vale's theft, clear Miriam of the £5,000, acknowledge Beatrice Pell as her sister, and name Clara as George and Dora's child. "You will not name Clara," Dora said on the cylinder. "She has a right to herself. She has a right not to be made into village entertainment. I am ending a lie. You are choosing the stage and calling it repentance." Honoria's answer came after a pause. "Perhaps, but truth does not become false because the speaker is vain." The cylinder ended with the scrape of a chair. It did not record a threat or murder. It proved something subtler. Honoria had devised the whole bus stop deception, and Dora had known from the beginning that Honoria intended to reveal Clara's parentage. The motive was not fear of being blamed for the fire. The ledger cleared Dora of that. Nor was it merely blackmail. It was the furious wish to control the truth before Honoria could control it first. Dora looked at Clara. "I thought if Flint were exposed and Honoria silenced, Miriam would be cleared without your name entering it. You thought you could give me innocence by taking away my history." "Yes." "No," Clara said. "You thought you could keep being the sad lady who mended my dress. You did not want to become the mother who abandoned me." The accuracy of it broke Dora more completely than accusation. She sat on the platform step. "Miriam promised to tell you when you were old enough. Then every year she found another reason to wait. I was grateful. I was a coward. When Honoria said she would announce it before the parish, I begged for one day to speak to you. She refused. She reached for her drops while we argued." "And you had replaced them," Rook said. Dora nodded. She had prepared the foxglove infusion before going to Vale House, carrying it in the school bottle beneath her coat. During Clara's visit, Dora waited in the garden shed. When Clara left, Dora entered for the final rehearsal, exchanged the medicine bottles, and watched Honoria take the fatal dose. "I could have called Marsh," she said. "There was time, perhaps. Instead, I let her believe it was her heart. When she fell, the plan was all around me. The veil, the dummy, the cart, the warmers. It seemed less like inventing a crime than stepping into one Honoria had built. She placed the corpse at the stop, performed the 2 replies through the tube, and joined the waiting group. Afterward, she took the cylinder from the portable recorder, but did not know Honoria had made a second copy and hidden it in the clock. Major Flint's death had not been planned until he approached her at Vale House. He had seen her emerge from Church Lane and understood the substitution. He demanded the ledger and threatened to tell Clara everything in the ugliest possible form. "So you wrote his confession," Elspeth said. "I wanted him to bear publicly what he had done privately. You also wrote what he had not done. You made him claim sole guilt. He had lived comfortably with larger lies." Dora planted the reading room scene before the search began. She put water and lipstick in the second glass, laid out Honoria's unfinished chess position, and placed the forged confession on the table. The breaking window and trapped pigeon drew attention at 8, establishing the room in everyone's mind. Later, she poisoned Flint's flask cork at the inn and left the blue pencil summons on his pillow. Flint entered the room alone, locked the door, recognized Honoria's chess challenge and poured his whiskey. The locked room locked only the victim in with poison he carried himself. "The phrase in the confession convicted you," Elspeth said. "You corrected between she and myself before Inspector Rook read it. A forged voice is hardest to maintain when it makes a mistake the forger cannot bear." Dora gave a small nod. "My last lesson." Rook fastened the handcuffs. Clara did not embrace Dora or promise forgiveness. She stepped close enough to say, "Miriam was my mother. You are also my mother. Both truths will have to live together." For Dora, that was harsher than rejection and kinder than pardon. The village took months to settle. Though villages never truly settle, they merely arrange disturbances into stories. At first the stories were cruel. Lydia corrected them with the persistence Dora once reserved for grammar. Miriam had borrowed £50, not 5,000. Beatrice had entered the fire for papers, not money. Clara had been rescued, not discarded without love. Facts repeated patiently became their own memorial. Major Flint and George Vale were formally named as the thieves of the relief fund. Miriam Venn's name was cleared of the larger crime, while her taking of £50 was recorded with the reason beside it. Lydia insisted upon that completeness. A merciful lie would only begin the trouble again, she said. She inherited Vale House and opened the Blue Room as a small village archive. Clara used part of Honoria's bequest to establish a fund for women who needed legal or medical help and had no respectable relative willing to provide it. Dr. Marsh served without fee. Silas Reed resigned as parish treasurer, after admitting he had suspected Flint for years and remained silent. Martha Crowe stayed with Lydia, though she declared the new mistress scandalously careless about dust. On the first clear morning of spring, Elspeth and Lydia stood at the bus stop beneath a newly printed timetable. The shelter smelled of fresh paint and hawthorn drifting from the lane. In Lydia's hands the robin's wing had healed. It pecked once at her thumb, then flew into the churchyard yew. "Do you think Aunt Honoria knew she might die?" Lydia asked. "She knew she was dealing with frightened people," Elspeth said. "She underestimated what fear can make of love. Did she love us? Yes. Badly, proudly, and too late. But yes. The Creswick bus appeared beyond the mill. Its horn sounded once, ordinary and cheerful. Lydia checked the timetable, then laughed when it arrived exactly when it should. The doors opened. Clara waited inside and held out a hand to her. Lydia boarded, carrying no veil, no hidden ticket, and no borrowed name. For once, truth arrived neither early nor late, but exactly on time. Behind them, the empty bench stood in full sunlight, and no one in Bellwether ever again mistook silence for innocence.